Before listening to this story, don't forget to press the subscribe and like buttons so that your prayers will be answered. Was Sandra Bullock at charity gala, without knowing that it is Keanu Reeves. The grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel gleamed with golden chandeliers, the polished marble floors reflecting the glow of the evening's grandeur. The annual Hearts of Hope Charity Gala was an event where the elite of Hollywood and high society gathered to flaunt their wealth, under the noble excuse of giving back. Sandra Bullock, known for her effortless charm and grace, entered the venue in a sleek black dress, her hair in soft waves. Unlike many, she wasn't here to impress. She genuinely cared about the cause, providing scholarships for underprivileged students. As she made her way to the silent auction, admiring a painting by a young artist, a shrill voice interrupted her thoughts. "Oh darling, step aside." A tall woman in a shimmering silver gown snapped, barely glancing at her. It was Vivian Ashford, a notoriously arrogant socialite, who prided herself on knowing everyone important. "This piece is reserved for someone who actually belongs here." Sandra raised an amused eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Vivian scoffed, waving a manicured hand. "Don't act surprised. You're one of the help, aren't you? An assistant, maybe. You don't look like you can afford even the appetizers." She gave a fake syrupy smile before turning her back on Sandra entirely. Unbeknownst to Vivian, a tall man in a crisp black suit had witnessed the entire exchange from a distance. Keanu Reeves, ever the gentleman, had been watching with quiet amusement, but now he stepped forward, his signature kindness masking the mischief in his eyes. "Vivian," Keanu said in his deep, unmistakable voice, causing the woman to practically jump. "So lovely to see you." Vivian's face transformed instantly into a mask of adoration. "Keanu, oh my darling, I didn't know you'd be here." She placed a hand on his arm. "I hope you're considering my little investment proposal for the luxury resort in the Maldives." Keanu smiled, gently removing her hand. "Actually, I was just catching up with my date." He turned to Sandra and extended his arm with an unmistakable warmth. Vivian's face went from smug to ghostly pale in a heartbeat. "Your date?" she stammered. Sandra smirked, linking her arm with Keanu's. "Yep, turns out, I do belong here." Keanu turned to Vivian, his voice calm but firm. "It's always a good idea to be kind to people. You never know who they might be." Vivian's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. Sandra simply gave her a polite nod before strolling away with Keanu, leaving the flustered socialite drowning in her own embarrassment. As they walked toward the dance floor, Sandra chuckled. "You just love doing that, don't you?" Keanu grinned. "Absolutely." And with that, the two Hollywood legends danced the night away, leaving the stunned Vivian Ashford to reflect on one very important lesson. Never judge someone by their dress, because you just might be humiliating Keanu Reeves in disguise. Would you like any tweaks, or a different tone? As Sandra and Keanu twirled across the dance floor, the eyes of the entire ballroom followed them. The live orchestra played a soft waltz, the melody weaving through the air like silk. People whispered among themselves, some giggling at Vivian Ashford's misfortune, while others admired the effortless chemistry between the two Hollywood icons. Vivian, still standing frozen near the auction table, clutched her champagne flute so tightly her knuckles turned white. She felt a mix of horror and humiliation washing over her. She had just insulted Sandra Bullock. And worse, she had made a fool of herself in front of Keanu Reeves. Desperate to recover, she composed herself and strutted toward the couple, plastering a tight-lipped smile onto her face. "Keanu, darling," she cooed, pretending her earlier mistake never happened. "I just realized I didn't properly greet you. And Sandra, of course," she added hastily. Keanu, ever the gentleman, simply smiled. "Oh, I think you greeted Sandra quite well earlier," he said, his tone laced with subtle humor. Sandra fought back a laugh. "Yes, Vivian was kind enough to make sure I didn't outbid someone more deserving on that painting," she added, her eyes twinkling. Vivian swallowed hard. "Oh well, you know how these events are, so many new faces. I didn't recognize you right away." Sandra raised an eyebrow. "Of course, it happens." Vivian desperately needed to salvage her reputation. She turned to Keanu, leaning in slightly. "You must tell me about your latest project. I'd love to be involved, you know. Investing in cinema is such a passion of mine." Keanu chuckled, stepping back slightly. That's kind of you, Vivian, but tonight is about charity, not business. His voice was gentle, but his meaning was clear. Vivian's face twitched, realizing she wasn't going to claw her way out of this one. The power couple had gracefully shut her down. Just then, the auctioneer took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to announce the winning bids for our silent auction. Sandra and Keanu exchanged amused glances as the auctioneer continued. The stunning abstract painting by young artist Carlos Mendez has been won by Sandra Bullock. A murmur ran through the crowd as people chuckled knowingly. Vivian's eyes widened in horror. Sandra gave a triumphant smile. Oh, looks like I could afford it after all. Keanu grinned, and for a great cause. The room erupted in applause, with many guests laughing and giving Sandra nods of approval. Meanwhile, Vivian's face burned with embarrassment. With no way to regain her dignity, she quickly slinked off into the crowd, avoiding eye contact. Keanu turned to Sandra and offered his arm. Shall we celebrate with more dancing? Sandra linked her arm with his and smirked. Only if you promise not to let me trip in these heels. Keanu chuckled. You, trip, never. As they glided back to the dance floor, Vivian Ashford sat at the bar, stirring her drink with a straw, fuming. She had learned an unforgettable lesson that night. Never judge a book by its cover. And more importantly, never underestimate Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves. And so the night continued, full of laughter, charity, and a little bit of well-deserved karma. What do you think? Want any more twists added? As the night progressed, Sandra and Keanu enjoyed themselves, greeting old friends and making new ones. The atmosphere was warm, filled with the glow of candlelight and the clinking of glasses. The charity gala had turned out to be quite the event, but neither of them could shake the memory of Vivian's humiliation. Keanu, always one to look at the brighter side of things, nudged Sandra playfully. Do you think she's still fuming at the bar? Sandra glanced toward the far side of the ballroom where Vivian sat, absently staring off into space. She smirked. Oh, absolutely, but I have to give her credit. At least she's not throwing a tantrum. Just then a nervous-looking young woman in a simple yet elegant dress approached them. Ms. Bullock, Mr. Reeves, she asked hesitantly. Both of them turned with warm smiles. Yes, Sandra replied. I just wanted to say thank you, the woman stammered. My name is Clara. I was one of the students who received a scholarship from this charity 2 years ago. Because of it, I was able to go to college, and now I'm studying to become a doctor. Sandra's eyes lit up and Keanu beamed. That's incredible, Clara. Sandra said, genuinely touched. You're exactly why we're here tonight. Clara blushed. I was actually the one who painted the artwork you won in the auction. I never expected it to go to someone like you. Sandra's mouth dropped open in surprise before she broke into a wide grin. No way, that painting is yours. It's beautiful. I can't wait to hang it up. Keanu nodded in admiration. You have real talent, Clara. Keep going. You're going to change lives, both with your art and your medical career. Clara's eyes shimmered with tears. I can't thank you enough. Not just for tonight, but for everything you do. You and Mr. Reeves, people like you make all the difference. Sandra, moved beyond words, reached out and gave Clara a warm hug. No, Clara, you make the difference. We're just here to help push things along. Keanu gave her a proud nod. And you're proving that all of this is worth it. As Clara thanked them once more and walked away, Sandra and Keanu exchanged knowing looks. This was the real reason they attended these events. Not for the glamour, not for the social status, but to witness firsthand how kindness and generosity could change lives. Keanu raised his champagne glass to real impact. Sandra clinked her glass against his, to the people who deserve it. From across the room, Vivian Ashford watched the interaction with narrowed eyes. She had spent the night sulking, embarrassed and humiliated. But something in her expression shifted. For the first time she saw beyond the diamonds, the designer gowns, and the desperate chase for status. Maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong. As Keanu and Sandra shared a laugh and returned to the dance floor, Vivian let out a slow breath. She wasn't sure if she was ready to change, but she knew one thing for certain. Tonight, she had been taught a lesson she would never forget. And as the music swelled and the gala continued, the true meaning of the evening shined brighter than all the chandeliers in the ballroom. The end. I hope you like the extended version. Let me know if you want any extra twists or changes. As the night wound down, the guests slowly trickled out of the ballroom, their expensive shoes clicking against the marble floors. The gala had been a success, raising millions for the scholarship fund, and the energy in the air was still electric. Keanu and Sandra stepped outside onto the grand terrace, where the city lights twinkled below them. The cool night air was a welcome relief from the warmth of the ballroom. Sandra leaned against the stone railing, gazing at the skyline. You know, she mused, swirling the champagne in a glass, I've been to a lot of these events, but tonight felt different. Keanu leaned beside her, hands in his pockets, because we got to witness firsthand what this was all about. Sandra nodded. Yeah, Clara's story, seeing how much of a difference this charity makes, it kind of puts things into perspective. Keanu smiled softly. It's easy to get lost in the glitz and glamour, but moments like that, that's the real reward. Sandra sighed contentedly. You always have the best way of looking at things. He chuckled. Comes with age and a lot of motorcycle rides. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, letting the hum of the city fill the air. Then out of the corner of her eye, Sandra noticed someone hovering near the entrance of the terrace. Vivian Ashford. She wasn't strutting or smirking this time. Instead, she looked hesitant, unsure of herself, almost vulnerable. Keanu noticed too. He exchanged a glance with Sandra before nodding subtly. Vivian hesitated, then approached, her heels clicking softly against the stone floor. She cleared her throat, her voice lacking the usual arrogance. I wanted to say something. Sandra crossed her arms, waiting. Vivian took a breath. I was wrong about you. About tonight. She glanced down as if admitting it physically pained her. I judged you without knowing who you were, and I shouldn't have done that. Sandra arched an eyebrow. No, you shouldn't have. Vivian winced, but nodded. I suppose I've spent so much time surrounded by people who only care about wealth and status that I forgot what events like this are actually about. She looked directly at Sandra, for once not treating her like an outsider. I saw how you treated that girl, Clara, and how she talked about what this charity did for her. It made me realize I've never actually listened before. Keanu studied her with his usual quiet wisdom. And what are you going to do with that realization? Vivian swallowed, shifting uncomfortably. I don't know yet, but I'd like to start by making things right. She looked at Sandra sincerely. I'm sorry. Sandra, never one to hold grudges, exhaled slowly. She could see the effort in Vivian's words, the vulnerability in admitting fault. Well, Sandra said, giving her a small smirk, that's a decent start. Vivian let out a breath, almost relieved. Keanu, ever the peacemaker, chuckled. Change doesn't happen overnight, but realizing you need to change, that's step one. Vivian nodded slowly. Then, without another word, she gave a small grateful smile before turning and walking away. Sandra watched her go, shaking her head in amused disbelief. Well, that was unexpected. Keanu shrugged. People surprise you sometimes. Sandra sighed and leaned back against the railing. Think she'll actually change? Keanu smiled knowingly. Maybe. Maybe not. But at least now, she knows better. Sandra clinked her champagne glass against his. I'll drink to that. And as the night continued, the two friends stood together under the starlit sky, knowing that tonight, in more ways than one, had been a night of transformation. The end. How's that for a satisfying conclusion? Let me know if you want any tweaks. As the last of the gala guests departed, Keanu and Sandra lingered on the terrace, the cool night air wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. The city stretched before them, alive with twinkling lights, a reminder that even in a world full of pretentious galas and social climbers, genuine moments of connection still existed. Sandra exhaled and glanced at Keanu. You ever get tired of all this? Keanu smirked. The fancy parties. She nodded, swirling the last of her champagne. Yeah, the politics, the egos, the fake smiles. Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in some bizarre reality show. Keanu chuckled, his deep voice warm. Yeah, I get that, but then, you meet people like Clara, and it reminds you why you show up in the first place. Sandra smiled. That's why I keep you around, you know. You're like my personal Zen master. He grinned, happy to be of service. Just then, the doors to the ballroom opened, and a staff member in a tuxedo stepped out, carrying a wrapped canvas. Miss Bullock, he called out hesitantly. Sandra turned. Yeah. The man approached and carefully handed her the package. Your painting. We wanted to make sure you got it before you left. Sandra took it, her fingers running over the edges of the frame. Thanks. As the staff member left, she unwrapped the top portion, revealing the bold, expressive strokes of Clara's artwork. It was vibrant, full of energy and emotion, so much heart put into a single piece. Keanu peered over her shoulder. It's beautiful. Sandra nodded, feeling something stir inside her. It really is. A pause. Then a mischievous smile played on Keanu's lips. So, where are we putting it, your place or mine? Sandra laughed, rolling her eyes. Nice try, Reeves, this baby is mine. Keanu feigned disappointment. I guess I'll just have to bid against you next time. You would, she teased. They both laughed, the kind of genuine, easy laughter that only comes from years of friendship. Finally, Sandra sighed and straightened up. Alright, come on, let's get out of here before they try to make us donate another $1 million. Keanu grinned, extending his arm. After you. As they stepped off the terrace and into the waiting night, the city welcomed them once more, two Hollywood icons who, despite all the glitz and glamour, never forgot what truly mattered. And somewhere inside the ballroom, Vivian Ashford sat alone, staring into her drink, the echoes of the night's events swirling in her mind. Maybe she would change. Maybe she wouldn't. But one thing was certain, she would never underestimate Sandra Bullock again. The real end. I think this gives the story a perfect mix of humor, heart, and a little lingering tension. What do you think?